in my life right now, I just found out that my parents are gonna get a divorce. The longest time when I was living with them and they were fighting, it was like, I want you to get a divorce. And I would say that to them as sort of like trying to get out of that situation, even if that's a really horrible thing to say. The intention was for everyone to be happier than they were then, and now that it's actually happening, I was really scared that like them not being focused on each other, they would come and focus on me and like take away my autonomy. And I had this like crippling moment of like sheer panic that like what happens if their sort of anger and you know whatever's happening with them was so contained inside this house in Connecticut that now that it's going to break out of that, I felt like someone was coming after me, and that like it was like gonna attack me and take away my freedom, and that was horrifying. But so I made all these paintings at the end of college about houses, and they're like purposely there were no people in them. It's like very vacant, but still had this weird anthropomorphic life to it. It's like sort of frantic terror, and now I'm really interested in this like idea about housing terror and like Pandora's box, and this sort of idea of like how we contain things emotionally and infrastructurally, like what architecture do we use to surround our public emotions versus private emotions, which are housed so that we don't see them, and then like the sort of relationship between that. Maybe for the longest time I wanted to do apartment complex corridor installations where it would be like multiple doors coming off a hallway, and then each room would be temperature controlled, and I would fill this like, you know, they'd be set up as girls' rooms or as living rooms, and they'd each be connected to some, you know, traumatic, there'd be a little, you know, personal narrative happening. And then the whole idea was that each room would be temperature controlled, so that like as you're walking through it at different points, different jars of frozen water would explode in the rooms behind the doors. When I was growing up, I did this thing in my head where it's like you switch the definitions. So like violence equals love, hate equals like acceptance, you know, anger equals communication and sustenance, so that I could keep a sane world. And now there's this really weird thing where I've like grown out of that and have learned that that's actually not how people interact, and it actually like hinders me from achieving what I want. But at the same time, being unable to stop feeling how I feel when I see violence, which is overwhelming joy and overwhelming happiness, because it's what I taught myself to feel so that I could survive. And it's like I don't understand. It's like now when it happens to me, I don't know how to process it, because it's like totally disconnected and not, it doesn't fit. So it's like, how do I begin to talk about feelings that aren't meant to exist? The way I started drawing was I started drawing me. Basically, I just started drawing little girls. That's how I like taught myself everything from like old Good Housekeeping magazines from the 50s, just those like cartoon character. I mean, the bastard version ends up looking like that. I mean, I've taken it and changed it, but it began as like, you know, Dick and Jane-esque. So now that I don't like see myself as this sad thing, the drawings have become individual, as I no longer need to put myself in this cultural narrative because I had no narrative of my own. There's this thing that someone I really love always says to me, which is that the story of like how porcupines keep warm, which is that like porcupines to survive during the winter have to get together to keep warm, because if they're alone they'll die, but they actually, when they get close, their spines poke each other, so they start bleeding. So there's this like very real acknowledgement and acceptance of physical pain in order to like be to get, like, it's just like a silly little metaphor for like, you know, the stuff that matters and how it's all like very painful at times but necessary.